The life I had with my husband, David, was built on a foundation of two things: his deep, unwavering love for me and his frequent flyer miles. For the 5 years we were married, David was a high-level logistics consultant, a job title so impressively vague and important-sounding that no one ever really questioned it. It meant late-night calls with Singapore, last-minute trips to Frankfurt, and long weeks where he was nothing more than a voice on the phone, tired, but always loving. I was proud of him. I was the supportive wife to a brilliant man who was conquering the world, one supply chain optimization at a time. I was also a complete and utter fool. The first thread in the tapestry of his lies came loose on a Tuesday morning. It was a tiny thing, a gas station receipt that had fallen out of his suit jacket pocket while I was gathering his dry cleaning. I picked it up, intending to throw it away, but the location caught my eye: Maple Creek. It was a sleepy little suburban town about 3 hours north. It was most definitely not on the way to the international airport. I frowned, my brain doing a quick calculation. He'd left for a conference in Chicago 2 days ago. Why would he have driven 3 hours in the opposite direction of the airport first? I tried to make it make sense. Maybe he had a meeting with a local supplier first. Maybe he got turned around. But the feeling was like a tiny pebble in my shoe, annoying, out of place, and impossible to ignore. For a few weeks, I let it go. I told myself I was being paranoid. David was a good husband. He called every night when he was away. He brought me thoughtful souvenirs. He remembered the little things, like how I took my coffee and my irrational fear of moths. He was the man who held my hand through my father's illness and who promised we'd plant a garden full of lavender and rosemary next spring. Men like that don't have secrets. Then came the second thread. He called me from a client dinner in Houston, his voice full of exhaustion as he described the dry, boring steak he was eating. The next week, I was paying our credit card bill online and saw the charge from that night. It wasn't from an expensive Houston steakhouse. It was from a place called Wacky Willie's Pizza Palace in a town just outside Maple Creek. I stared at the charge. Wacky Willie's Pizza Palace? It sounded like the last place on earth a high-level consultant would take a client. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. The pebble in my shoe was starting to feel more like a shard of glass. I started paying closer attention. I became a reluctant detective in my own life. I noticed that his business trips often coincided with long weekends or school holidays. I noticed that when I'd ask for specific details about his work, his answers were always masterfully vague, filled with corporate jargon that meant nothing. He'd talk about synergizing assets and leveraging platforms until my eyes glazed over, a tactic I now realize was expertly designed to shut down any real conversation. The real break in the case came from his car. He had a fancy new model with a built-in GPS that he was still trying to figure out. One evening, while he was in the shower, I went out to the garage, my heart pounding with a mixture of guilt and dread. I fumbled with the controls, my hands shaking, until I found the trip history. There were dozens of trips to the airport, to his office, to our usual spots. But there was one address that appeared over and over again, at least twice a month for the past 2 years, an address on Oak Street in Maple Creek. My breath hitched. This wasn't a random detour. This was a destination, a regular part of his life that I knew nothing about. When he came downstairs, I confronted him. I tried to be casual, to keep my voice from shaking. "Hey, honey, I was trying to set up my work address in your car's GPS and saw this address in Maple Creek programmed in. Do we know someone there?" The change in him was instantaneous, though subtle. A flicker of something, panic, crossed his eyes before being replaced by a smooth, easy smile. "Oh, that," he said, laughing it off. "That's nothing, babe. Head office is looking at a new warehouse space out there. It's all super confidential, under NDA, you know how it is. I've had to pop out there a few times to survey the site. It's boring as hell, honestly." It was the perfect explanation. It was plausible, professional, and it made me feel like an idiot for even asking. He was making me feel like I was the one being intrusive and untrusting. He kissed my forehead, told me he loved me, and went to make a cup of tea, leaving me standing in the living room feeling small and ashamed. For a moment, I almost believed him. I wanted to believe him. Believing him meant my world wasn't a lie. But the shard of glass was still in my shoe. I called my best friend Jenna and told her everything, my voice a whisper so David wouldn't overhear. The gas receipt, the pizza palace, the GPS, the NDA. Jenna was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Clara, no company signs an NDA for a warehouse survey. That's not a thing. And consultants don't take clients to a place called Wacky Willie's Pizza Palace." Hearing her say it out loud solidified the fear that had been swirling in my gut. I wasn't crazy. Something was very, very wrong. "What do I do, Jenna?" I asked, my voice breaking. "What does this mean?" She said, "I don't know what it means, but I know what you have to do. You have to go to Maple Creek. You have to see what's on Oak Street." The thought sent a wave of pure terror through me. What if it was nothing? What if I drove all the way out there and found an empty lot, proving that I was just a paranoid, jealous wife? But then, what if it was something? What if it was the answer to all the inconsistencies, all the weird feelings, all the little lies? David was scheduled to leave for a 3-day conference in Denver the following week. He packed his bag, kissed me goodbye with that familiar, loving smile, and promised to call me from his hotel. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I went to my own. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely put the key in the ignition. I had the address from the GPS plugged into my phone. I had a full tank of gas and a stomach churning with acid. I didn't know what I was driving toward. I only knew that the life I was living felt like a house of cards, and I had to know if the wind was about to blow it all down. The 3-hour drive to Maple Creek was the longest of my life. I felt like a spy in a cheap movie, complete with sunglasses and a baseball cap, as if that would somehow make me invisible. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. An illegal side business? A gambling problem? A sick relative he never told me about? My brain, in its desperate attempt to protect me, refused to land on the most obvious, devastating explanation. I pulled into Maple Creek around noon. It was exactly what you'd expect. Quaint, quiet, with tree-lined streets and white picket fences. It was aggressively wholesome. I found Oak Street and drove slowly, my heart thudding against my ribs as the house numbers climbed. And then I saw it. It wasn't a warehouse. It wasn't an office building or an empty lot. It was a house. A pretty blue house with a perfectly manicured lawn, a basketball hoop over the garage, and a minivan in the driveway. A family home. I parked across the street, my car hidden behind a large oak tree, and I just watched, my breath held tight in my chest. For half an hour, nothing happened. I started to feel foolish. Maybe it was his sister's house. Maybe it was an old friend. I was about to start the car and drive away, ready to call Jenna and tell her it was a false alarm, when the front door of the blue house opened. And my husband, David, walked out. He wasn't wearing his consulting suit. He was wearing faded jeans and a Green Bay Packers t-shirt. He was carrying a yellow plastic watering can. He started whistling as he watered a pot of bright red geraniums on the front porch. He looked relaxed, happy. He looked home. I felt the air leave my lungs in a single painful gasp. The world tilted on its axis, the quiet suburban street blurring at the edges. But the horror was just beginning. The front door opened again, and a woman stepped out onto the porch. She was blonde, pretty, and wearing yoga pants and a messy bun. She was holding 2 glasses of lemonade. She handed one to David, and he leaned in and kissed her. Not a peck on the cheek, a real, lingering kiss, the kind he gave me when he came home from his trips. My vision went black for a second. This couldn't be real. This had to be a nightmare. Then, the screen door slammed open and two small children, a boy and a girl maybe 5 and 7 years old, ran out onto the lawn. They were laughing, chasing a soccer ball. The little boy tripped and fell, scraping his knee. He immediately burst into tears, and David, my brilliant, busy, world-traveling husband, rushed over, scooped the little boy up into his arms, and kissed his knee. "You're okay, champ," I heard him say. His voice, my husband's voice, carrying across the quiet street. "Let's get you a bandage." He carried the crying boy back into the blue house, the blonde woman following with a concerned hand on his back. They moved together with an easy, practiced familiarity. The little girl toddled after them, calling out, "Daddy, wait for me!" Daddy. The word hit me with the force of a physical blow. I slumped back in my seat, a strange, guttural noise escaping my throat. It was a sound of pure agony. My body felt both numb and on fire. The house of cards wasn't just blown over, it had been incinerated, and I was sitting in the ashes. He wasn't in Denver. He wasn't a consultant who traveled for work. His work, his other life, was here, in this pretty blue house, with his other wife and his other children. I don't know how long I sat there parked across the street. It could have been 10 minutes or 2 hours. Time had ceased to have any meaning. My entire reality had been ripped apart, and my brain was struggling to stitch it back together into something that made sense. But it didn't. None of it did. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of whispered I love yous from different time zones, of missed anniversaries because of urgent client meetings, of me alone in our big bed, feeling proud of his sacrifices. They weren't sacrifices. They were logistics. He wasn't managing supply chains. He was managing 2 separate lives. How dare he? How dare he make me the other woman in my own marriage? How dare he build a life with me on a foundation of such monumental deceit? Every memory I had was now a crime scene. Our wedding vows, a fraud. Our plans for the future, a sick joke. That lavender and rosemary garden we were going to plant, I wanted to salt the earth where it was supposed to grow. I started the car, my movements stiff and robotic. My first instinct was to drive over there, to storm up to that pretty blue door and blow his 2 perfect worlds apart right then and there. I wanted to see the look on his face. I wanted his other wife to see him for the liar he was. But as I gripped the steering wheel, another thought, a colder, more calculating thought, pushed its way through the rage. A scene wouldn't be enough. A confrontation would give him the chance to control the narrative, to twist the story, to paint me as the crazy, hysterical wife. He was good at that. He'd been doing it to me in small ways for years, making me doubt my own feelings, my own reality. No, he didn't deserve a quick explosion. He deserved a slow, meticulous demolition. He deserved to have his life dismantled with the same careful planning he used to build his web of lies. I drove away from Oak Street, my eyes dry. I didn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears. By the time I got back to my own empty house, the house that now felt like a stage set for a play I never knew I was in, a plan had begun to form. It was audacious, it was terrifying, and it was perfect. I spent the rest of the day in a fugue state, fueled by coffee and a cold fury. I became the consultant. My project, the complete and utter annihilation of David's double life. I started with his office, his real office, the one here in our city. I called the main line, pretending to be a florist confirming a delivery for our upcoming anniversary. "Yes, for David Miller in the logistics department?" The receptionist sounded confused. "We don't have a David Miller in logistics," she said. "We have a David Miller in regional sales." My blood ran cold. Another lie. Not just about his travel, but about his entire job. "Oh," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "He must have been transferred. He's so busy, he forgets to tell me these things." She laughed politely. "Well, he's not here today. He took the week off. Family emergency, I think." A family emergency. Was that what he called his other family? I thanked her and hung up, my mind reeling. Regional sales. A job that would explain some travel, but not the constant international trips he claimed. It would, however, require him to know the region, including, presumably, towns like Maple Creek. I went online, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I was a woman possessed. I did a property record search for the address on Oak Street. The owners were listed as David and Emily Miller. Emily. Her name was Emily. Seeing it in black and white next to his name was like a fresh stab wound. They had bought the house 6 years ago, a year before he and I even got married. This wasn't a recent affair. I wasn't the first wife who had been cheated on. I was the second wife. I was the affair. My entire 5-year marriage was his infidelity. I felt the nausea rise again. I ran to the bathroom and was sick. As I knelt on the cold tile floor, shaking, I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide with a horror that felt ancient. Who was I? Who was the woman who had been so easily fooled? The supportive wife, the proud partner. It was all a lie. But as I stared at my own reflection, the pathetic, broken woman looking back at me began to morph. Her eyes hardened, her jaw set. He had made me a fool, but he had also made me a detective. And now he was about to make him his judge, jury, and executioner. The next day, David called from Denver. His voice was full of the usual tired affection. "Hey, babe. Long day. The keynote speaker was a real snooze fest. How are things at home?" I played my part. It was the performance of a lifetime. "Oh, same old. Just missing my husband." My words were poison-tipped darts, but he couldn't feel them. "I miss you too," he said, and I could hear the lie, thick and cloying through the phone. "More than you know." "Oh, I think I do," I said. We chatted for a few more minutes about nothing. The weather, a funny thing our cat did. It was the most surreal conversation of my life. I was talking to a man who had just kissed his other wife, who had just tucked his other children into bed, and he was telling me he couldn't wait to come home to me. The audacity of it was breathtaking. After we hung up, I put the next phase of my plan into motion. I found Emily Miller on social media. Her profile was private, but her profile picture was public. It was a family photo. David, Emily, and the 2 children all smiling on a beach. They looked so happy, so normal. My husband, his wife, and their kids. I screenshotted it, the image burning onto my phone and into my brain. Her bio read, "Mom to Lily and Leo, wife to my amazing husband, living the dream in Maple Creek." I started digging deeper. A private investigator would have been proud. I found her on Pinterest. She had a board called Dream Home Ideas. She had another called Recipes to Try. She had one called Our Family Adventures. It was filled with pictures of them at pumpkin patches, at school concerts, on camping trips, all taken on weekends when David was supposedly stuck in customs in Dubai or in back-to-back meetings in London. I felt a strange, chilling detachment as I scrolled through the evidence of his other life. It was like watching a movie, and I had just discovered the shocking third act twist. The final piece of my plan was the most important. Our 5-year wedding anniversary was in 2 weeks. David had, of course, a mandatory work trip to Vancouver that week, but he had promised me we would have a huge party to celebrate the weekend before he left. We had already booked a caterer and sent out invitations to all our friends and family. My family, the ones who loved him and thought he was the perfect man for me. My original plan for the party had been a romantic, elegant affair. Now it was going to be a theater of war, and I had just found my surprise guest of honor. I created a new anonymous email account. I drafted a message, my fingers cold and steady. The recipient, Emily Miller. The subject line, Your Husband. The body of the email was simple. I attached the picture of David and me from our wedding day, a picture he had always said was his favorite. Underneath it, I wrote, "I think we have a problem. Your husband is also my husband, and I think it's time you and I had a talk.
Our anniversary party is on Saturday, the 24th, at 7 p.m. I suggest you be there. Your children's future might depend on it." I didn't sign my name. I just included the address, my address, and the invitation to the party. I stared at the screen for a long time, my finger hovering over the send button. This was the point of no return. Once I sent this, there was no going back. The quiet demolition would become a full-blown explosion. Part of me screamed in protest, the part that still foolishly loved the man I thought he was. But the new part of me, the part forged in the fire of his betrayal, knew what she had to do. I hit send. The invitation was delivered. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for the guest of honor to arrive and watch the two worlds of David Miller collide. The 2 weeks leading up to the party were the most surreal of my life. I was living with a ghost. David came home from Denver, bearing gifts and apologies for being so busy. He slipped back into our life with a seamless ease that was terrifying to watch. He'd kiss me in the morning, his lips still warm from whatever lies he'd told his other wife on the phone the night before. He'd talk about our future, about the trips we'd take, about growing old together, all while I knew he had another future, another old age planned with someone else. I played the part of the loving wife flawlessly. I smiled, I laughed, I listened to his fabricated stories about work with a serene, Stepford-like calm. Inside, I was a coiled spring of rage and adrenaline. Every touch felt like a violation. Every "I love you" was an insult. I had to physically restrain myself from screaming the truth in his face a dozen times a day. My only solace was the plan. It was my North Star in a universe that had gone completely dark. I checked the anonymous email account every hour. For 3 days, there was no reply from Emily. A part of me started to panic. What if she thought it was a prank? What if she was so deep in his web of lies that she refused to believe it? What if she told David and he canceled his Vancouver trip and my whole plan fell apart? But then, on the 4th day, a reply appeared. It was short and chilling. "Who is this? What is this? This is some kind of sick joke." I wrote back immediately. "It's no joke. Ask your husband where he was on June 10th of last year. He told me he was in Zurich. I have the credit card receipts from a romantic dinner we had in our city. I also have this." I attached another photo, a selfie of David and me on a beach in Mexico, from a vacation we had taken, a vacation he probably told her was a solo team-building retreat. The response came faster this time. "That's not possible. He was with me. It was her son's birthday." The cracks were showing. She was defending him, but she was also checking the facts. She was starting her own unwilling investigation. I didn't reply. I had planted the seed of doubt. Now I just had to wait for it to grow. The day of the party arrived. Our home, which we had spent years decorating together, was filled with flowers and the low hum of a catering team setting up. Our friends and family would be arriving in a few hours. David was in high spirits, a charming, attentive host-to-be. He came up behind me as I was arranging place cards and wrapped his arms around my waist. "Happy anniversary, my love," he whispered in my ear. 5 years, can you believe it? I stiffened, a wave of revulsion washing over me. I turned in his arms and forced a smile. "I can't wait to celebrate with you," I said, my voice sweet as poison. He had no idea. He was a dead man walking, smiling his way to his own execution. Guests started to arrive. My parents, my sister Jenna, who knew everything and was watching David with a look of such pure loathing I was afraid she'd break character. Our friends, his colleagues from regional sales. Everyone was laughing, drinking champagne, congratulating us. David was in his element, the center of attention, accepting praise for being such a wonderful husband. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. Every time the doorbell rang, my heart leapt into my throat. Was it her? Jenna would catch my eye from across the room and give me a subtle, questioning look. I'd just shake my head slightly. Not yet. The party was in full swing.
David was holding court by the fireplace, telling some embellished story about a business deal. I was standing with my parents, listening to them tell me how lucky I was to have found a man like David, when the doorbell rang again. This time I knew. It was a feeling deep in my bones. I excused myself, my legs feeling strangely steady. I walked to the door and pulled it open. And there she was, Emily. She looked different from her photos. Her face was pale and drawn, her eyes red-rimmed but filled with a fierce, desperate light. She was holding her phone in a white-knuckled grip. She wasn't dressed for a party. She was dressed for war. "It's you," she whispered, her eyes scanning my face, then looking past me into the house filled with people. "It's all real." "Yes," I said softly, "it is. Are you ready?" She just nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. I stepped aside and let her in. I led her into the living room. The chatter died down as people noticed the stranger by my side, a woman who was clearly not here to celebrate. David had his back to us. I waited until there was a lull in the conversation, then I spoke, my voice clear and ringing in the sudden silence. "David, honey, there's someone here I'd like you to meet." He turned around, a jovial smile on his face, ready to greet another guest. The smile froze, then shattered when he saw Emily standing next to me. The color drained from his face. I have never seen a human being look so utterly, completely terrified. It was as if he was seeing two ghosts, the ghost of his past and the ghost of his future, standing side by side. The room was utterly silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone was staring, confused at the tableau before them. The smiling husband, now paralyzed with fear. The two women, one on each side of him, one dressed for a party, one for a funeral. "Emily?" he stammered, his voice a choked whisper. What are you doing here?" Emily took a step forward, her voice shaking but strong. "It's you, David. Or should I say, I could ask your wife the same thing." She said the word wife with a sarcastic, venomous twist, looking directly at me. The guests gasped. My mother put her hand to her mouth. David looked back and forth between us, his mind racing, trying to find a lie big enough to cover this. But there wasn't one. The game was over. "I don't understand," his sales manager said from the corner. "Clara, who is this?" I took a deep, steadying breath. It was time for my keynote speech. "Everyone," I announced, my voice ringing with a power I didn't know I possessed, "I'd like to thank you all for coming to celebrate 5 years of my marriage to David, a marriage I thought was real. This is Emily. She's been married to David for 6 years. They have 2 children, Lily and Leo. She thought David was in Vancouver this weekend, just like he was in Denver last week when he was actually at home with his other family. It turns out my husband isn't a logistics consultant. He's a regional sales rep, and his biggest, most successful product is lies." I looked at David, at the ruin of the man I thought I loved. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was finally, blessedly silent. Emily stepped forward again, her phone held up like a weapon. "It told me you were a crazy ex-colleague who was stalking him," she said, her voice breaking. "He showed me emails you supposedly sent. He probably faked them. He told me the trips were for work. He swore to me." My father took a step toward David, his face a thundercloud of rage. Our friends were staring, their mouths agape. It was a full-scale implosion. And then the most amazing thing happened. Emily looked away from David and looked at me. And in her eyes, I didn't see a rival. I saw a fellow victim. I saw a woman whose world had just been as shattered as mine. And in that moment, all the anger I had toward her, the woman who had unknowingly been a part of my pain, vanished. She wasn't the enemy. He was. "He told me," I said to her, my voice softening, "that he loved me. He told me we were going to grow old together." "He told me the same thing," she whispered. And then we both looked at the man standing between us, a man who had nothing left. His lies were exposed. His 2 perfect worlds had collided and annihilated each other.
The party ended, obviously. People left in stunned, whispering groups. My parents took me home with them that night, wrapping me in a protective cocoon of love. The aftermath was messy, of course. There were lawyers, there were endless, painful discoveries of financial infidelity on top of the emotional kind. David lost everything. His job fired him for the fraud, his family and friends, our friends, turned their backs on him. He had built his identity on the admiration of others, and when that was gone, he simply collapsed. I never spoke to him again after that night, but I did speak to Emily. We met for coffee a few weeks later. It was awkward and painful, but it was also necessary. We compared timelines, uncovered more lies. We were two strangers bound together by the extraordinary betrayal of one man. We will never be friends, but there is a strange, quiet understanding between us. We are the survivors of David Miller. I moved to a new city a few months later. A fresh start. I planted a garden at my new apartment. It's small, just a little balcony box, but it's full of lavender and rosemary, and it's all mine. Sometimes I wonder how one person could be capable of such profound deceit. But then I remember that night, the night his worlds collapsed and the look of utter ruin on his face, and I know that whatever life he builds now, it will be haunted by the ghosts of the two families he tried to have and the two women who, in the end, were smart enough to find each other. Thank you so much for listening to my story time. If you've ever been through something similar or have a story about betrayal and finding your strength, I would love to read about it in the comments below. Your stories make me feel less alone in this. And if you enjoyed this story time and want to see more, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out and ensures you won't miss the next story.